The October morning arrives with a kind of crispness that makes your breath visible, each exhale a small ghost dissolving into the New England air. Ryan Caldwell pulls his navy blazer tighter as he walks the cobblestone path toward Hawthorne Academy's imposing Gothic entrance, its ivy-covered walls bearing witness to over a century of privileged education. The leaves crunch beneath his leather shoes, a sound that should feel satisfying but somehow only amplifies his solitude. His phone buzzes at 7:42 a.m., 15 minutes before first period. The message is from his father's assistant. Mr. Caldwell's flight to Singapore moved up. Weekend visit postponed indefinitely. He sends his regrets. Ryan stops walking. Around him, other students flow past like water around a stone, laughing, complaining about upcoming tests. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Making plans for the weekend he now has no plans for. He stares at the screen, waiting for something more. An explanation, an apology, even a rescheduled date. But there's nothing else, just the cold efficiency of corporate communication applied to what used to be called fatherhood. Indefinitely, he whispers to himself, pocketing the phone without responding. What would be the point? The hallways of Hawthorne smell like old wood and floor polish, mixed with the faint aroma of the breakfast pastries served in the dining hall. Ryan navigates toward his locker, passing beneath oil paintings of distinguished alumni, senators, CEOs, federal judges, all men who probably learned early that disappointment was just another subject to master, like Latin or calculus. That's when he notices Samuel Ortiz. The janitor is kneeling beside a classroom door, his gray work shirt bearing the simple name tag, Samuel, in block letters. In his weathered hands, he holds a small screwdriver, carefully adjusting the hinges that have been squeaking for weeks. What catches Ryan's attention isn't the repair work, it's how Samuel greets each passing student. "Morning, Jessica. Don't forget you've got that presentation today. You've got this." The girl's nervous fidgeting immediately settles. "Hey there, Marcus. Your mom called yesterday. She's proud of that science project." The boy's grin could power the building. "David, walk tall today. Yesterday's behind you." A kid Ryan recognizes as a frequent detention resident actually straightens his shoulders. Ryan slows his pace, fascinated. In a school where most adults see students as either success stories or problems to manage, Samuel speaks to them like they're human beings. Like they matter, individually and specifically. It's then that Ryan notices the first-year student hovering nearby, clearly distressed. The boy, 11 or 12, with unruly red hair and thick glasses, is searching through his backpack with increasing panic, pulling out textbooks and notebooks and shoving them back in haphazardly. "I can't find it," the kid mutters. "I can't find my English notebook. Mrs. Henderson is going to kill me." Several older students walk past without a glance. Others actively avoid eye contact, not wanting to be associated with obvious distress. But Samuel looks up from his work, setting down his screwdriver. "Hey, Charlie," he says gently, standing and brushing dust from his knees. "Take a breath. Tell me when you last remember having it." The boy, Charlie, looks surprised that someone knows his name. "Yesterday in English class. I know I had it yesterday because I took notes on the essay assignment." Samuel nods thoughtfully. "You sit third row, right side, near the window?" "Yes, but how did you?" "I cleaned that classroom after you all left yesterday. Found a notebook that slid behind the radiator. Blue cover with your name inside." Samuel reaches into his cleaning cart's lower shelf and produces the missing notebook. Sometimes things just fall where we can't see them. Charlie's relief is immediate and profound. "Thank you, oh my God, thank you so much." "No problem. And Charlie?" Samuel's voice carries a note of gentle authority. "Mrs. Henderson isn't going to kill anybody. She just wants you to succeed. But maybe write your name on the outside cover too, just in case." As Charlie hurries away, clutching his notebook like a lifeline, Ryan realizes he's been standing there watching the entire exchange. Samuel glances over, and their eyes meet for just a moment. There's no judgment in Samuel's gaze, no assumption about why Ryan might be lingering. Just a quiet acknowledgement of his presence. "Morning," Samuel says simply, returning to his work on the door hinge. Ryan wants to say something. Thank you for being kind to Charlie. Or ask how Samuel remembers where everyone sits. Or maybe just explain why that text message is still burning in his pocket like a coal. Instead, he manages only, "Good morning, Mr. Ortiz." Samuel doesn't correct the formality, though Ryan catches a small smile. "Have a good day in class." Ryan continues toward his locker, but something has shifted in the air around him. In a place where adults speak to students in measured tones about achievement and expectations, where kindness often comes with conditions and recognition is earned through performance, Samuel Ortiz had simply seen a worried kid and helped him. No lecture about responsibility. No suggestion that Charlie should have been more careful. Just practical compassion delivered without fanfare. Later, during AP History, Ryan finds himself staring out the tall windows at the maintenance shed where Samuel's cart sits parked. He thinks about the way Samuel said Charlie's name, like the boy was worth knowing. He thinks about his father's assistant, who has never once called Ryan by his first name in 3 years of relaying messages. He thinks about the word indefinitely and what it means when applied to love. When the bell rings, signaling the end of second period, Ryan doesn't rush to his next class. He walks slowly, hoping to catch another glimpse of the man who fixes more than broken hinges. The man who seems to see the students everyone else overlooks. The man who, for just a moment this morning, made Ryan feel like he might be worth seeing too. The afternoon light slants through the tall windows of Hawthorne's east wing, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Most students have retreated to their dorms or the library, but Ryan finds himself lingering in the empty hallway near the art rooms. His excuse is thin. He forgot his sketchbook, he tells himself, but the truth sits heavier in his chest. The dorm room he shares with Eli feels too quiet, too full of the weekend plans he doesn't have. The sound of metal against metal draws him around the corner, where Samuel kneels before a stubborn locker, working methodically with a small tool Ryan doesn't recognize. The janitor's movements are patient and precise, like a surgeon or a watchmaker. There's something meditative about watching someone work who actually knows what they're doing. That looks complicated, Ryan ventures, immediately regretting how awkward he sounds. Samuel glances up, no surprise in his expression, as if he'd sensed Ryan's presence long before he spoke. "This old girl's been sticking for about a week. The mechanism gets gunked up. Happens with the older lockers. Sometimes you have to be gentle with things that have been working hard for a long time." Ryan nods, though he's not sure he entirely understands. Do you need any help?" "Sure," Samuel shifts slightly, making room. "Can you hold this flashlight? The angle's tricky." Ryan kneels beside him, accepting the small LED flashlight and aiming it where Samuel indicates. This close, he notices details about Samuel that aren't visible from a distance. Calloused hands that speak of years of careful work. A small scar above his left eyebrow, the way he hums softly under his breath while concentrating. They work in comfortable silence for several minutes. Samuel adjusts something internal, tests the latch, adjusts again. There's no frustration in his movements, no impatience with the stubborn mechanism, just steady persistence. "You're good at this," Ryan observes. "Practice. Everything mechanical has its own personality. Some things just need time and attention." Samuel pauses in his work, wiping his hands on a cloth. "What about you? What are you good at?" The question catches Ryan off guard. Teachers ask about grades, classmates ask about sports or video games, adults ask about college plans. No one asks what he's good at, as if the answer might be something worth knowing for its own sake. I draw sometimes, sketch, but I'm not really good at it." "Not good according to who?" Ryan considers this. "I don't know, I never show anyone, so I guess I don't really know if I'm good." Samuel resumes his work on the locker, but his attention remains on Ryan. "My daughter used to draw. She'd leave these little sketches everywhere. On napkins, in the margins of books, on the steamy bathroom mirror after her shower. Flowers, faces, made-up creatures. I'd find them weeks later and remember what I was thinking about when she drew them." The past tense doesn't escape Ryan's notice, but something in Samuel's tone suggests this isn't a subject to probe. Instead he asks, "Did she think she was good?" "She thought drawing was like breathing, something you do because you need to, not because you're trying to prove anything." Samuel gives the locker handle a final test. It opens smoothly, silently. "There we go. Sometimes things just need someone to pay attention to why they're stuck." As Samuel packs his tools, Ryan wrestles with words that want to spill out but don't know how to arrange themselves properly. Finally, he settles on, "My father was supposed to visit this weekend." Samuel pauses in his packing. Was supposed to? Singapore. Business emergency. They always are. Ryan's voice carries more bitterness than he intended. Samuel doesn't offer empty reassurances or rush to fill the silence. He simply nods, acknowledging the disappointment without trying to fix it. After a moment, he says, "You know what I've learned about measuring relationships?" Ryan shakes his head. It's not about how much time someone spends with you, it's about how much attention they give you when they're there. Some people can sit in the same room for hours and never really see you. Others can change your whole day with 5 minutes of actually paying attention. Is that why you remember everyone's names and where they sit? Names matter. When someone uses your name, it means you exist to them as more than just a problem to solve or a task to complete. Samuel stands, shouldering his tool bag. Your father, he's busy with important things, but that doesn't mean you're not important. Ryan wants to believe this, but the words feel fragile, like soap bubbles that might pop if examined too closely. How do you know? Because you're here, asking good questions, helping with stuck lockers, worrying about whether your drawings are good enough to share. Those aren't the actions of someone who doesn't matter. Down the hallway, Claire Whitman appears around the corner, her arms full of files from her office. She slows when she sees Ryan and Samuel together, her trained eye taking in the scene. The boy who usually rushes through hallways now kneeling beside the maintenance cart, the typically solitary student engaged in actual conversation with an adult who isn't asking about his grades. "Evening, Ms. Whitman," Samuel calls out. "Evening, Samuel. Ryan." She nods to both of them with equal warmth. "Working on the art room lockers?" "Just finished. Should be smooth sailing now." Claire's gaze lingers on Ryan for a moment, noting something different in his posture, his expression. As the school counselor, she's trained to spot changes in students, demeanor, and what she sees in Ryan interests her. Less guarded. More present. "Well, don't work too late, either of you. Even janitors and students need dinner." As Claire disappears down the hallway, Samuel gathers the last of his supplies. She's right about dinner. Cafeteria's probably serving something that technically qualifies as food. Ryan almost smiles. "Yeah, probably. Samuel?" "Yeah. Thanks. For the help with the light, I mean. And for listening." "Anytime." "And Ryan? About those drawings? Maybe the point isn't whether you're good. Maybe the point is that you see things worth drawing." As Samuel wheels his cart away, Ryan remains kneeling in the hallway for another moment, turning over the conversation in his mind. For the first time in months, the prospect of returning to his dorm room doesn't fill him with dread. He has something to think about besides his father's canceled visit, something warmer than disappointment to carry with him. Walking back toward the residential wing, Ryan finds himself really looking at the spaces around him, the way afternoon light transforms ordinary hallways, the patterns worn into old wooden floors by decades of hurried feet, the small details that might be worth capturing on paper, things worth drawing, as Samuel put it. He thinks about Singapore and business emergencies and the difference between spending time with someone and paying attention to them. He thinks about lockers that just need someone to understand why they're stuck. And for the first time in a very long time, Ryan Caldwell thinks he might have found someone who sees him as more than just a problem to solve. 3 weeks pass like leaves falling from the oak trees that line Hawthorne's main quad. Slowly, then all at once, each day bringing Ryan closer to something he doesn't yet have a name for. His morning routine shifts subtly. Instead of rushing to first period, he finds reasons to linger near the maintenance areas, a forgotten textbook in the art room, a question about the recycling procedures, a sudden interest in how the old radiators work. Samuel never comments on these increasingly frequent encounters, but Ryan notices how he always has time. Time to explain the difference between various cleaning supplies, time to demonstrate the proper way to change a fluorescent bulb, time to listen when Ryan mentions, almost casually, that his father called last Tuesday but only talked for 6 minutes before another call interrupted. Today, Ryan arrives at the art room to find several windows painted shut by decades of careless maintenance. The autumn air outside is crisp and clean, but inside, the atmosphere grows stuffy as the afternoon progresses. When he mentions this to Mrs. Chen during drawing class, She sighs with the resignation of someone who has made this request many times before. "I've put in 3 work orders," she tells the class. "Apparently it's not high priority." After the final bell, Ryan doesn't head toward the dining hall. Instead, he seeks out Samuel, finding him in the supply closet organizing cleaning products, with the methodical precision Ryan has come to associate with everything Samuel does. "The art room windows are stuck," Ryan says without preamble. Samuel looks up from labeling bottles. "Been that way since last spring, from what I hear. Old paint builds up in the sash tracks, makes them impossible to open without the right tools." "Do you have the right tools?" Samuel studies him for a moment, and Ryan wonders if his request is too transparent, too obviously manufactured to create time together. But instead of calling him out, Samuel simply nods. "I do. Want to learn how it's done?" 20 minutes later, they're standing in the art room while Samuel examines the stubborn windows with professional interest. He runs his fingers along the frame, testing different points of resistance, his touch gentle but thorough. "See this?" Samuel indicates where old paint has created a thick seal. Someone painted right over the moving parts. Probably happened multiple times over the years. The window wants to open, it's just trapped under all these layers. He produces a thin knife and begins scoring along the paint line with careful strokes. The trick is patience. If you force it, you'll break the glass or splinter the wood. But if you take your time, understand why it's stuck, you can usually free it without damage. Ryan watches, fascinated by Samuel's methodical approach. "How did you learn to do this stuff?" "Necessity, mostly. Growing up, we couldn't afford to call repair people for every little thing. My father worked construction, and he taught me that everything can be fixed if you're willing to figure out how it works first." Samuel pauses in his cutting. "Plus, I spent some time in offices before this job. You'd be surprised how often expensive buildings have basic maintenance problems nobody wants to deal with." "You worked in offices?" Ryan tries to keep his voice casual, but something in Samuel's phrasing has caught his attention. Samuel's hands still for just a moment. "Long time ago. Different life." He resumes his work on the paint seal. "Hand me that thin putty knife." Ryan passes him the tool, recognizing the gentle subject change. He's learned that Samuel shares information in layers like the paint they're carefully removing. You have to be patient, work systematically, respect the process. "My roommate thinks it's weird that I spend so much time talking to you," Ryan says, then immediately regrets the admission. Samuel's expression remains neutral as he works. "What do you think?" "I think Eli doesn't understand that most adults don't actually listen when you talk to them. They're just waiting for their turn to give advice or tell you what you should do differently." "And you think I listen?" Ryan considers this seriously. Over the past 3 weeks, Samuel has never once told him he should try harder in school, should call his father more often, should be grateful for his opportunities. Instead, he asks questions that suggest he's actually curious about the answers. "Yeah, you listen like the answers matter to you." Samuel applies gentle pressure to the window frame, testing the results of his paint cutting. "They do matter. You matter." The simple statement hangs in the air between them, surprising Ryan with its directness. He's used to qualified affection, love conditional on grades, approval tied to achievement, attention earned through performance. But Samuel's care seems to exist without requirements or expectations. "Why?" Ryan asks quietly. Samuel pauses, putty knife halfway along the window frame. "Why? What? Why do I matter? I'm just some kid you barely know." Samuel sets down his tool and looks directly at Ryan. "You know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who pays attention to other people. Who notices when that first-year kid couldn't find his notebook? Who cares whether the art room has fresh air? Who takes time to help hold a flashlight even when he doesn't have to? Those aren't small things, Ryan. The world needs more people who notice, who care about the details that make life bearable for others." Ryan feels something unlock in his chest, like one of Samuel's stubborn windows finally giving way. "Sometimes I feel invisible. Like I could disappear and nobody would notice for days." "I'd notice." Samuel's voice carries quiet certainty. "Mrs. Chen would notice. That counselor, Ms. Whitman, she'd notice. Your roommate might drive you crazy, but he'd notice too. And your father." Samuel pauses, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people get so focused on providing for someone, that they forget to just be present with them. Doesn't mean the love isn't there. Just means it's expressed in a language you might not recognize. How do you know so much about fathers? The question slips out before Ryan can stop it. Samuel's expression shifts almost imperceptibly, a shadow crossing his features so briefly that Ryan might have imagined it. I was a father once. And I had a father who worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed. I learned about love from both sides of that equation. The past tense again. Ryan wants to ask more, but something in Samuel's posture suggests this is sacred ground, not to be traversed lightly. Instead, he watches as Samuel returns to the window, applying steady upward pressure until, with a satisfying crack of breaking paint, it slides open 6 inches. Cool October air flows into the room immediately, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of rain. "There we go," Samuel says with satisfaction. Just needed someone to understand why it was stuck. They work on the remaining windows in companionable quiet, Ryan holding tools and learning techniques he never imagined he'd want to know. As each window surrenders to Samuel's patient persistence, the art room transforms from stuffy classroom to bright, airy space where creativity might actually flourish. "Mrs. Chen is going to be so happy," Ryan observes as they clean up their tools. "She is, but the real reward is that now when you're in here drawing, you'll have fresh air to breathe while you work." I still don't show anyone my drawings. Samuel nods, packing the putty knives back into his toolkit. "That's okay. Maybe someday you will. Maybe you won't. The important thing is that you keep doing something that makes you feel alive. The world has enough people going through the motions. It needs more people who pay attention to what feeds their soul." As they prepare to leave the art room, Ryan realizes he's spent the past 2 hours without once checking his phone or thinking about his father's latest canceled plans. For the first time since arriving at Hawthorne Academy, he feels grounded in the present moment, rather than floating somewhere between disappointment and anticipation. "Samuel," he says as they walk toward the hallway. "Yeah? Thanks for teaching me about the windows." Samuel smiles, a real smile, not the polite expression adults use when they're humoring children. "Thanks for caring whether they worked." Walking back toward the residential hall, Ryan breathes deeply, tasting the fresh air that now flows freely through spaces that had been sealed shut for months. He thinks about patience and persistence, about understanding why things get stuck before trying to force them open. He thinks about fathers who express love in languages their children don't recognize, and janitors who see worth in people others might overlook. And for the first time in his 14 years, Ryan Caldwell begins to understand the difference between being alone and being lonely, and realizes that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't have to be either. November arrives at Hawthorne Academy with the kind of gray dampness that seeps into old bones and older buildings. The radiators clank to life each morning, fighting against drafts that slip through window frames despite Samuel's recent repairs. But there's another kind of chill spreading through the corridors, the cold breath of gossip, whispered conversations that stop when certain people approach. Ryan first notices it during morning assembly when he catches Jenny Martinez and her friends glancing in his direction, their heads bent together in the conspiratorial way that makes his stomach tighten. Later, walking to chemistry class, he overhears fragments of conversation that feel pointed, deliberate. Spending an awful lot of time. Inappropriate if you ask me. What kind of boundaries does this school actually have? By lunch, the whispers have crystallized into something more direct. Eli drops his sandwich onto his tray with uncharacteristic force and looks across the dining hall table with an expression Ryan has never seen before, protective and slightly angry. "Okay, what's the deal with you and the janitor?" Eli asks without preamble. Ryan's fork pauses halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Ashley Pemberton just asked me if it's true that you have a school dad now. And when I asked what the hell she meant, she said everyone's talking about how you're always hanging around Samuel Ortiz." Eli leans forward, lowering his voice, which, for the record, I told her was none of her damn business. Ryan sets down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. "People are talking about that?" "Some people. The ones with nothing better to do." Eli's expression softens. "Look, I get it. Samuel's cool. He actually treats us like human beings instead of just rich kids who need to be managed. But maybe, I don't know, maybe be a little more subtle about it?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The suggestion stings more than Ryan expects. Subtle about what? Having a conversation with someone who actually listens? That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. Ryan pushes back from the table. It's exactly what you meant. God forbid I talk to someone who doesn't care about my last name or my father's net worth. Ryan, wait! But Ryan is already walking away, his cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. He knows Eli means well. Knows his roommate is probably trying to protect him from exactly this kind of social scrutiny. But the implication that his friendship with Samuel is somehow shameful sits like a stone in his chest. He finds himself in the art room, where Mrs. Chen is preparing for her afternoon classes. The windows Samuel repaired stand open despite the November chill, bringing fresh air and the scent of wet leaves into the space that had been stuffy for so long. Ryan, Mrs. Chen looks up from arranging paintbrushes. You're here early. Everything all right? Fine, he lies, then immediately reconsiders. Mrs. Chen has never pressed him for information, but she's also never pretended not to notice when something was wrong. Actually, no. People are talking. Mrs. Chen sets down the brushes and gives him her full attention. About? About me spending time with Samuel, like it's weird or inappropriate or something. Understanding crosses Mrs. Chen's features. Ah, and what do you think about that? I think people need to mind their own business. The words come out sharper than he intended. Perhaps, but I suspect what's really bothering you isn't that people are talking. It's that part of you is worried they might be right. Ryan wants to deny this, but Mrs. Chen has a way of seeing through defensive responses. What if they are right? What if it is weird? Is it weird to have found an adult who treats you with respect and kindness? Is it weird to want to spend time with someone who sees your worth as a person rather than as a collection of achievements or problems? Mrs. Chen sits on the edge of her desk. Or are you worried about something else? Ryan considers this. I guess I'm worried that if I care too much, if I let people see how much his friendship means to me, then when it goes away, because it will go away, everyone will know how pathetic I am. The admission hangs in the air between them, raw and honest. Mrs. Chen nods slowly, as if she's been waiting for him to arrive at this truth. You know what I have observed about Samuel Ortiz in the 2 years he's worked here, she says. He doesn't form casual friendships. When he cares about someone, he's remarkably consistent. And he clearly cares about you. How can you tell? Because yesterday he asked me if I thought you might benefit from entering that regional art competition I mentioned. He said he'd noticed you sketching during lunch and wondered if you'd ever considered sharing your work more widely. Ryan stares at her. He said that? He did. Now, I can't promise that friendship will last forever. No one can promise that about any relationship. But I can tell you that genuine care, the kind Samuel shows, doesn't usually disappear because of gossip or social pressure. Later that afternoon, Ryan finds Samuel in the basement, performing routine maintenance on the school's aging boiler system. The mechanical room is warm and filled with the steady hum of machinery that keeps Hawthorne's old bones heated through the long New England winter. Heard you had some excitement at lunch today, Samuel says without looking up from the gauge he's checking. Ryan's stomach drops. You heard about that? Ms. Whitman mentioned she'd seen you leave the dining hall looking upset. And Eli came by about an hour ago, looking like he'd swallowed something sour, asking if I knew whether you were okay. People are talking, Ryan says flatly. Samuel nods, making a note on his maintenance log. People often do, especially in places like this where everyone knows everyone else's business. What are they saying? That it's weird, that we spend too much time together, that there should be boundaries. Samuel finishes his notations and turns to face Ryan fully. And what do you think? I think they don't understand. They think because you're the janitor and I'm a student, or because you're older and I'm younger, that we can't just be friends. Friends, Samuel repeats, and something in his tone makes Ryan look up. Is that what we are? For a moment, Ryan panics, wondering if he's presumed too much, if he's misread the warmth and attention Samuel has shown him. But then he sees the slight smile playing at the corners of Samuel's mouth. I hope so, Ryan says quietly. Then that's what we are, and friends don't abandon each other because other people don't understand the relationship. Relief floods through Ryan's chest. So you're not going to start avoiding me or anything? Samuel's expression grows serious. Ryan, I want you to listen to me carefully. I've lived long enough to know the difference between friendship that enriches your life and attention that comes with hidden costs. What I offer you, my time, my listening, my care, comes with no strings attached. It's not dependent on your performance in school, your behavior, or other people's approval. It exists because you're worth knowing, worth caring about, worth investing in. Even if it makes things complicated for you, especially then. You know what I've learned about complications? They usually arise when people are afraid to be honest about what matters to them. I'm not afraid to say that your friendship matters to me. 3 floors above them, in her office overlooking the main quad, Claire Whitman finishes typing notes from her conversation with Eli Porter. The boy had come to her office that afternoon, clearly struggling with guilt over his lunchtime conversation with Ryan. I didn't mean to make him feel bad, Eli had explained. I just thought, people were starting to talk, and I thought maybe if he knew, he could be more careful. Claire had listened with the practiced attention of someone who understands that teenage social dynamics often reveal deeper truths about human nature. Now she stares out at the November afternoon, thinking about the delicate ecosystems that exist within school communities. Her phone rings, disrupting her thoughts. The caller ID shows a number she recognizes, Alexander Caldwell's direct line. Ms. Whitman. His voice carries the brisk efficiency she's come to associate with their infrequent conversations. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Mr. Caldwell. What can I do for you? I've been hearing some concerns about Ryan's social interactions at school. Something about inappropriate friendships with staff members? Claire's grip tightens on the phone. I'm not sure what you mean by inappropriate, Mr. Caldwell. Come now, Ms. Whitman. Surely you can see how it might look. A 14-year-old boy spending excessive amounts of time with a male janitor? The optics alone are concerning, not to mention the potential for misunderstandings. Claire chooses her words carefully. Ryan has formed a positive mentorship relationship with Samuel Ortiz, one of our most respected staff members. Samuel has been nothing but appropriate and beneficial to Ryan's emotional well-being. That may be your assessment, but I'm not comfortable with the situation. I think it would be best if this mentorship were discouraged. Perhaps Mr. Ortiz could be reminded of appropriate boundaries with students. The line goes quiet for a moment. Claire weighs her response, knowing that what she says next could determine whether Ryan loses one of the few positive adult relationships in his life. Mr. Caldwell, she says finally, I understand your concerns as a parent, but I have to ask, have you noticed any negative changes in Ryan since this friendship began? Any decline in his academic performance or emotional stability? That's not the point. Actually, it is exactly the point. Ryan has shown marked improvement in both areas. He's more engaged in class, more communicative with his teachers, and generally appears happier and more confident. Sometimes the relationships that concern us from the outside are exactly the ones our children need most. After Alexander hangs up, promising to think about her perspective, Claire sits in the gathering dusk of her office, wondering how many valuable connections are lost to fear and misunderstanding. Outside her window, she can see Samuel's maintenance cart parked near the dormitory entrance, and she knows that somewhere in the building, a lonely boy has found someone who sees his worth. She makes a mental note to have a conversation with Mrs. Dunlop first thing in the morning. Some battles are worth fighting, and some friendships are worth protecting, even when the people who should care most are the ones creating the obstacles. The black Mercedes pulls through Hawthorne Academy's main gate on a Tuesday morning when the November sky hangs low and gray, promising snow that won't quite materialize. Alexander Caldwell hadn't announced his visit, a calculated choice designed to see the school as it truly operates rather than the polished version they might present for a scheduled inspection. He parks near the administrative building and sits for a moment, studying the Gothic architecture that has housed 3 generations of America's elite. His own father had attended Hawthorne, graduating in 1967 before building the manufacturing empire that Alexander would later transform into a global technology conglomerate. Tradition matters in families like the Caldwells, and Hawthorne represents the kind of continuity that anchors legacy, which makes the current situation all the more troubling. Alexander's conversation with Claire Whitman had left him unsatisfied, her deflections raising more questions than answers. As CEO of a company with 40,000 employees, he's learned to recognize when people are managing him rather than addressing his concerns. The counselor's defensive tone suggested she was protecting something, or someone. He makes his way toward the dormitory, intending to surprise Ryan with lunch off campus. It's an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that perhaps he's been too absent lately. The Singapore deal had required more personal attention than anticipated, but it would establish their Asian market presence for the next decade. Ryan is intelligent enough to understand that sometimes sacrifice in the present enables security in the future. The path between buildings winds through the quad where leaves drift across ancient flagstones, their rustle the only sound in the late morning quiet. Most students are in class, which makes the two figures by the old oak tree all the more conspicuous. Alexander recognizes his son immediately. Ryan's posture, the way he tilts his head when listening intently, the unconscious gesture of pushing his dark hair back from his forehead. But it takes Alexander several seconds to place the man sitting beside Ryan on the weathered bench. When recognition hits, it's like ice water in his veins. Samuel Ortiz looks older, his dark hair now touched with silver at the temples, his face bearing lines that weren't there 15 years ago. But the eyes are unmistakable, the same thoughtful brown eyes that used to look across conference room tables, challenging Alexander's assumptions, pushing for solutions that prioritized people over profit margins. The same eyes that had looked at him with disappointment and something approaching pity the day Samuel walked away from everything they'd built together. Alexander approaches slowly, his business training kicking in. Never reveal your hand too early. Never let emotion drive strategy. Always maintain the advantage of information asymmetry. Ryan, he calls out when he's close enough to be heard without shouting. Both heads turn toward him. Ryan's expression shifts from surprise to something approaching panic. The look of a child caught in an act he can't quite identify as wrong, but knows others might interpret as such. Samuel's face reveals nothing, but he stands immediately, extending his hand with professional courtesy. Mr. Caldwell. Samuel. Alexander's voice is carefully neutral as he accepts the handshake. Samuel's grip is firm, calloused, the hands of someone who works with tools rather than keyboards and contracts. I didn't expect to find you here. I work here, Samuel says simply, maintenance and custodial services. The words hang in the air between them, loaded with 15 years of unspoken history. Alexander processes this information, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about his son's inappropriate friendship. This isn't just some well-meaning janitor taking interest in a lonely student. This is Samuel Ortiz, his former partner, former friend, former rival, now in a position to influence Alexander's son. Dad? Ryan's voice cuts through the tension. I didn't know you were coming. Alexander forces his attention back to his son, noting details that suddenly seem significant. Ryan looks better, more present. The sullen withdrawal that had characterized their last few interactions has been replaced by something approaching confidence. I wanted to surprise you. Thought we might have lunch off campus. Alexander's eyes flick back to Samuel. Unless you have other plans. No plans, Ryan says quickly. He glances at Samuel with what looks like apology. Samuel was telling me about different career paths. Different ways people find meaningful work. The irony is almost overwhelming. Samuel, who had walked away from more money than most people see in a lifetime, giving career advice to Alexander's son. The same Samuel who had accused Alexander of losing sight of what actually mattered, of measuring success only in market share and quarterly earnings. How thoughtful, Alexander says, his tone suggesting anything but gratitude. Samuel always did have strong opinions about meaningful work. Samuel's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in his posture. I should get back to my duties. Ryan, remember what we talked about regarding that art project? I will. Thanks for listening. Samuel nods to Alexander with professional courtesy. Mr. Caldwell, good to see you again. As Samuel walks away, Alexander watches him go, noting the easy confidence in his stride, the way he acknowledges students who pass by. This is not a man diminished by his circumstances. If anything, Samuel seems more at peace than Alexander remembers him ever being during their partnership. Dad? Ryan's voice draws his attention back. Is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Nothing like that. Come on, let's get some lunch. I have reservations at the inn down the road. During the drive, Alexander struggles to process what he's just witnessed. The easy rapport between Ryan and Samuel, the way his son's entire demeanor had brightened in Samuel's presence, the obvious respect and affection flowing both directions. More troubling is what he'd seen in Samuel's eyes during their brief exchange, not the bitterness or resentment Alexander might have expected, but something approaching compassion. As if Samuel understood exactly why Alexander was there and felt sorry for him. At the restaurant, Ryan picks at his salmon while Alexander studies his son's face, looking for signs of whatever influence Samuel might be exerting. "You seem different," Alexander observes. "More settled." Ryan looks up from his plate. "Different how?" "I don't know. Happier, maybe. More confident. Your last few progress reports have been quite positive. School's been good lately. Any particular reason?" Ryan hesitates, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I've made some good friends. People who see me for who I am, not just whose son I am." The comment stings, though Alexander suspects it wasn't intended as an attack. "And Samuel Ortiz is one of these friends?" Ryan's fork pauses. "Yes, he is." "Ryan, I need you to understand something. Samuel and we have a history. We used to work together, years ago. And when that partnership ended, it wasn't under the best circumstances." Ryan's eyes widen. "You know Samuel?" "I did, very well. And while I'm sure he's a perfectly decent person, I'm concerned about the appropriateness of your friendship with him." "Appropriateness?" Ryan's voice carries an edge Alexander hasn't heard before. "What does that mean?" "It means that sometimes adults form attachments to young people for reasons that aren't entirely healthy. And sometimes young people, especially those who feel neglected by their families, become vulnerable to that kind of attention." The words are out before Alexander fully considers their impact. Ryan's face goes through several emotions: hurt, anger, and something that looks like protective fury. "Neglected by their families?" Ryan's voice is quiet, dangerous. "And whose fault would that be?" "Ryan." "No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to show up here after months of canceled visits and postponed phone calls and accuse the one person who actually cares about me of having ulterior motives." "That's not what I'm saying." "Yes, it is. It's exactly what you're saying. Because, God forbid, someone else might give me the attention you're too busy to provide." The restaurant has gone quiet around them. Alexander realizes they've become the kind of family drama that other diners pretend not to notice while hanging on every word. "We'll discuss this at home," Alexander says quietly. "This is my home," Ryan replies, "and Samuel is my friend. And if you can't handle that, maybe the problem isn't with him." The drive back to campus passes in silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they pull up to the dormitory, Alexander makes one final attempt. "Ryan, I'm only trying to protect you." "From what?" "From someone who actually listens when I talk. From someone who sees me as more than just a problem to manage or an achievement to celebrate." Ryan gets out of the car without saying goodbye, leaving Alexander alone with the weight of his son's words and the uncomfortable realization that everything about this situation is more complicated than he'd imagined. That evening, Alexander sits in his hotel room, staring at his laptop screen. Samuel's name appears in 17 different news articles from their early days as partners, back when their startup was being hailed as the next big thing in cloud computing. Before the board meetings where they disagreed about expansion strategies, before the late-night arguments about corporate responsibility versus shareholder value, before the morning Samuel had walked into Alexander's office and quietly announced he was leaving. "I can't be part of this anymore," Samuel had said. "We're not building what we set out to build. We're not the people we set out to be." Alexander had accused him of being naive, of lacking the stomach for real business. Samuel had looked at him with something approaching pity and said, "I hope someday you remember what actually matters." No, 15 years later, Samuel is mopping floors and fixing windows and apparently providing Alexander's son with something Alexander himself has failed to give. The question is, what exactly is he providing, and why does Alexander feel so threatened by it? Outside his hotel window, Hawthorne Academy's lights twinkle in the darkness, and somewhere in those dormitories, his son is probably processing their conversation, maybe even talking to Samuel about it. The thought fills Alexander with an emotion he can't quite name, something between jealousy and fear, with an undertone of loss he doesn't want to examine too closely. Tomorrow, he decides, he'll have a conversation with Mrs. Dunlop, not as a concerned parent, but as a significant donor, with legitimate questions about staff boundaries and student safety. Some problems require more than conversation to solve. The ancient laptop wheezes to life in the corner of Ryan and Eli's dorm room, its fan whirring with the effort of running software it was never designed to handle. Ryan stares at the blue glow of the search screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he tries to decide what questions to ask. "You sure about this?" Eli asks from his bed, where he's supposedly doing calculus homework but has been watching Ryan's internal struggle for the past 20 minutes. "I mean, whatever's going on between your dad and Samuel, maybe it's better left alone." Ryan's conversation with his father 3 days ago plays on repeat in his mind. The recognition in Alexander's eyes, when he saw Samuel. The careful way they'd spoken to each other, like diplomats from countries that had signed a peace treaty but still didn't trust the terms. And underneath it all, the weight of history that Ryan could feel but not understand. Samuel Ortiz, Massachusetts yields over 3,000 results. Ryan scrolls through social media profiles, obituaries for people with similar names, and real estate records. Nothing matches the Samuel he knows. Try adding technology or business, Eli suggests, abandoning any pretense of homework. Samuel Ortiz technology changes everything. The third result is a TechCrunch article from 2008. CloudVault co-founder steps down amid company restructuring. Ryan clicks the link, his heart racing. The photo loads slowly, pixel by pixel, but it's unmistakably Samuel, younger, wearing a crisp blue shirt and tie, standing next to a familiar figure in an expensive suit. Alexander Caldwell, maybe 35 years old, grinning with the confidence of someone who believes the world is his to shape. The caption reads, CloudVault co-founders Samuel Ortiz left and Alexander Caldwell announced their cloud storage platform's $50 million Series B funding round. "Holy shit," Eli breathes, reading over Ryan's shoulder. "Your janitor friend co-founded a company with your dad?" Ryan's hands shake as he scrolls down to read the article. Words jump out at him. Innovative partnership. Revolutionary data storage solutions. Positioned for explosive growth. The piece is dated 6 years before Ryan was born, back when his father was still building the empire that would define the Caldwell family legacy. "There's more," Ryan says, clicking through to related articles. "Look at this." A 2009 piece from Wired magazine, CloudVault's surprise shakeup, What Really Happened to Samuel Ortiz. This article is longer, more investigative, and considerably less flattering to Alexander. Sources close to the company suggest that Ortiz and Caldwell had fundamentally different visions for CloudVault's future. Ryan reads aloud. While Caldwell pushed for rapid expansion and maximum profitability, Ortiz reportedly favored sustainable growth and stronger worker protections. The split appears to have been acrimonious, though both men publicly maintained that it was amicable. Eli sits down heavily in his desk chair. "Your dad basically forced Samuel out of his own company?" "It says here that Samuel sold his shares back to the company for significantly less than market value. Sources suggest Ortiz wanted a clean break and was willing to take a financial loss to achieve it." Ryan's voice grows quieter as he reads. The article estimates he walked away from approximately $40 million. The room falls silent except for the laptop's laboring fan. Ryan stares at the screen, trying to reconcile the man who patiently taught him to fix stuck windows with the tech entrepreneur who had helped build one of the most successful cloud computing companies of the early 2000s. "There's got to be more," Ryan says, clicking through search results with increasing desperation. What happened after he left CloudVault? Where did he go? Most of the subsequent articles focus on Alexander and CloudVault's continued success. Samuel's name disappears from the technology press as if he'd never existed. It's only when Ryan searches for Samuel Ortiz 2010 tragedy that he finds the piece that makes everything click into place. The Boston Globe, March 15, 2010. Local family killed in highway accident. The article is brief, clinical in its details. A drunk driver had crossed the median on Route 95, killing Maria Ortiz, 34, and her daughter Isabella, 8, instantly. Samuel Ortiz, 35, survived with minor injuries. This is from 6 months after he left Cloudvault, Ryan whispers. His wife and daughter. He scrolls down to find a small photo accompanying the article, a family picture that must have been provided by relatives. Samuel, young and happy, his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair and kind eyes. Between them, a little girl with her mother's smile and her father's thoughtful gaze. Horrors. Jesus, Eli says softly. No wonder he doesn't talk about having a family. Ryan closes the laptop and sits on his bed, staring at the wall where he's pinned some of his sketches. Scenes from around campus, portraits of classmates, abstract compositions that capture feelings he doesn't have words for. Everything Samuel has said to him over the past month takes on new meaning. The way he talks about paying attention to what matters. His gentle insistence that worth isn't measured by achievement or status. His understanding of loss and loneliness that seems to come from lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. What are you going to do? Eli asks. I don't know. Do I tell him I know? Do I pretend I don't? Do I ask him about it? Maybe the question is whether it changes anything. Ryan considers this. Does it change how he feels about Samuel? Not really. If anything, it makes him respect Samuel more. The man had walked away from everything most people spend their lives chasing, had survived unimaginable loss, and had somehow found his way to a life of quiet service and genuine connection. But it does change how he understands his father's reaction. Alexander's hostility suddenly makes sense. Samuel represents a road not taken, a set of values that Alexander had rejected in favor of relentless growth and accumulation. Seeing Samuel happy and fulfilled in his simple life must feel like a judgment on every choice Alexander has made since their partnership ended. 3 buildings away, in the maintenance office, Samuel sits at his desk filling out routine work orders, but his mind is elsewhere. He's been thinking about Alexander's unexpected visit, about the look in his former partner's eyes when they shook hands. There had been recognition, yes, but also something harder to define, suspicion, maybe, or fear. Samuel knows that Alexander's appearance at Hawthorne wasn't coincidental. Word travels fast in small communities, and Ryan's father has undoubtedly heard about their friendship. The question is what Alexander plans to do about it. Samuel's phone buzzes with a text from his sister Carmen in San Antonio. Saw your name in the news again. Some blogger writing about Cloudvault's early days. Thought you should know. He sighs and sets the phone aside without reading the attached link. The past has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, like buried stones working their way to the surface after winter frost. Samuel has made peace with his history, but that doesn't mean he wants it dissected by strangers or used as ammunition by people who never understood his choices. The truth is, Samuel had started to care about Ryan more than was probably wise. The boy reminds him of Isabella in unexpected ways, not in appearance, but in the hunger for authentic connection, the way he pays attention to small details others miss, the gentle empathy that hasn't yet been hardened by disappointment. Samuel had told himself he was just being kind to a lonely kid, but somewhere along the way, Ryan had become the son he'd never had a chance to watch grow up, the young person he could guide and encourage and love without reservation. Now Alexander's presence threatens that bond, and Samuel isn't sure how to protect it without revealing truths that might hurt Ryan more than help him. A knock on his office door interrupts his thoughts. Claire Whitman stands in the doorway, her expression serious. Samuel, do you have a few minutes? I think we need to talk. Samuel gestures to the chair across from his desk. I'm guessing this is about Ryan. And his father. Mrs. Dunlop got a call this morning. Alexander Caldwell has requested a meeting with the Board of Trustees to discuss staff conduct policies and appropriate boundaries between employees and students. Samuel nods slowly. He'd expected something like this, though he'd hoped Alexander might have more sense than to make their personal history a public issue. What's the school's position? He asks. Officially? That you've done nothing inappropriate, and that Ryan has shown marked improvement since your friendship began. Mrs. Dunlop thinks very highly of you, and she's not easily swayed by parental pressure, even from major donors. And unofficially? Claire hesitates. Unofficially, she's concerned that this might become messy in ways that could damage both you and Ryan. She wanted me to ask if there's anything about your history with Alexander Caldwell that the administration should know. Samuel looks out his small window at the campus where he's found unexpected peace over the past 2 years. Students cross the quad in small groups, their laughter carrying on the November air. This place has become home in a way he hadn't expected, and the thought of losing it feels like another kind of death. But more than that, the thought of losing Ryan, of watching that light of trust and curiosity dim because adults can't manage their own complicated feelings, makes Samuel's chest tight with protective fury. "Our history is complicated," he says finally, "but it has nothing to do with Ryan, and it shouldn't be allowed to hurt him." Claire nods. "That's what I thought you'd say. For what it's worth, I agree. But Samuel, you might want to prepare for this to get worse before it gets better. Men like Alexander Caldwell don't like feeling out of control, and right now, his son's happiness depends on someone he can't manage or influence." After Claire leaves, Samuel sits alone in his office as darkness settles over the campus. Somewhere in the dormitories, Ryan is probably working on homework or talking with his roommate, unaware that his two most important relationships are about to collide in ways that could reshape his entire world. Samuel thinks about Maria and Isabella, about the life they'd planned together before a drunk driver stole their future. He thinks about the fortune he'd walked away from and has never regretted leaving behind. He thinks about the quiet satisfaction of work that makes a difference, of students who know his name and trust his kindness. And he thinks about a lonely boy who has somehow become family, and what he's willing to sacrifice to protect that bond. Outside his window, the first snow of the season begins to fall, dusting the ancient stones of Hawthorne Academy with pristine white. By morning, the campus will be transformed, beautiful and clean and temporary, just like everything else worth loving in this world. The workshop in Hawthorne's basement smells like wood polish and honest work, tools arranged with the precision of someone who understands that order creates peace. Ryan finds Samuel here on a gray Thursday afternoon, bent over a desk he's repairing for Mrs. Chen's art room. The steady rhythm of Samuel's sanding provides a counterpoint to the questions that have been burning in Ryan's chest for 3 days. Ryan clears his throat, and Samuel looks up with the warm smile that has become as familiar as sunrise. But today, Ryan sees something different in those brown eyes, a guardedness that wasn't there before, as if Samuel knows this conversation was always inevitable. "I need to show you something," Ryan says, pulling the folded printouts from his backpack. His hands shake slightly as he spreads them across Samuel's workbench. The TechCrunch article, the Wired piece, the Boston Globe obituary. Samuel's face goes completely still. He sets down his sandpaper and stares at the photo of himself and Alexander, young and optimistic, arms around each other's shoulders like the brothers they once were. "How long have you known?" Samuel asks quietly. 3 days, since my father came to visit." Ryan's voice is steadier than he feels. "I knew there was history between you two. I could feel it. But I didn't know. I didn't know about your wife and daughter, about what you walked away from." Samuel sits heavily on a work stool, suddenly looking every one of his 50 years. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. I want to understand who you really are." Samuel is quiet for so long that Ryan begins to wonder if he's pushed too far, asked for more than Samuel is willing to give. Finally, Samuel speaks, his voice carrying the weight of memories he's kept locked away. "I met your father in 2003. We were both working for different tech companies, both dreaming of building something that mattered. Cloud storage was still new then, and we had this vision of democratizing data access, making it so that small businesses and individuals could have the same technological advantages as major corporations." Samuel picks up one of the printouts, tracing the edge of the paper with his finger. "We were good together, your father and I. He had the business instincts, the ability to see market opportunities and capitalize on them. I had the technical background and, I guess you'd call it, the social conscience. We balanced each other. What happened? Success happened. Cloud Vault took off faster than we'd imagined. Suddenly we had investors, board meetings, pressure to expand internationally. Your father thrived in that environment. He loved the strategy, the competition, the endless growth. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being partners and became something else." Samuel stands and walks to the small window that looks out onto the campus grounds. Students hurry past, bundled against the November cold, their breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. "I wanted to maintain our original values, fair wages for our employees, ethical data practices, sustainable growth that didn't sacrifice our principles for profit. Your father saw those concerns as obstacles to maximizing our potential. So you left. Not immediately. We fought about it for months. Board meetings became battlegrounds. I'd propose employee profit sharing. He'd counter with stock buybacks. I'd advocate for stronger privacy protections. He'd argue they would slow our competitive advantage. Samuel's voice grows quieter. The final straw came when he wanted to relocate our manufacturing to a country with weaker labor laws. I couldn't be part of that. Ryan absorbs this, thinking about his father's relentless pursuit of growth, his impatience with anything that slowed progress or reduced efficiency. He forced you out? He made it clear that my vision was no longer welcome, so I sold my shares back to the company at a significant discount because I wanted a clean break. I thought I'd start over, maybe build something smaller, but more aligned with my values. Samuel returns to the workbench, running his hand along the smooth surface of the desk he's been restoring. But then Maria and Isabella were killed. And suddenly nothing else mattered. All the money in the world couldn't bring them back, couldn't fill the hole they left behind. The words hang in the air between them, heavy with grief that time has softened but never erased. Ryan thinks about the family photo he'd seen online, about the life Samuel had lost in a single moment of another person's carelessness. "I'm sorry," Ryan says, inadequate words for an immeasurable loss. For 2 years after the accident, I barely functioned. I lived off the money from Caldwell, but it felt like blood money, payment for abandoning my principles, for choosing wealth over values. When I finally emerged from the worst of the grief, I knew I needed to find work that felt meaningful again. Not work that made me rich, but work that made me useful. "So you became a janitor." Samuel's smile is sad but genuine. "I became a custodian at a small elementary school in Boston. Spent my days keeping spaces clean and safe for children, watching them learn and grow and discover who they were meant to be. There was something healing about that, about being part of something that mattered without needing to be the center of it." Ryan understands now why Samuel had been drawn to him, why their friendship had developed so naturally. "You saw your daughter in me, in all the students." At first, maybe, but you're not Isabella, Ryan. You're your own person with your own gifts and struggles and potential. What I see in you is someone who notices things others miss, who cares about fairness and kindness, who has the capacity to choose meaning over achievement. Samuel meets Ryan's eyes directly. "You remind me of the best parts of myself, before I lost my way in corporate politics and market pressures." Is that why my father is so threatened by our friendship? Because I might choose differently than he did? Samuel considers this carefully. Your father isn't a bad man, Ryan. He's brilliant and driven and capable of great things. But somewhere along the way, he started measuring success only by external metrics, profit margins, market share, competitive advantage. He forgot that the point of building something isn't just to win, but to create value that makes the world better. And he thinks you're trying to turn me against him? I think he's afraid that you might judge his choices the way I did, that you might walk away from everything he's built if you decide it doesn't align with your values. Ryan thinks about this, about the weight of expectation that has shaped his entire life, about the assumption that he would naturally follow in his father's footsteps, about the pressure to be grateful for opportunities he never asked for. What if I do walk away, Ryan asks. What if I decide I don't want any part of his world? Samuel's expression grows serious. Then that's your choice to make. But don't make it to spite him. And don't make it to please me. Make it because you know who you are and what matters to you. They sit in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of revealed truth settling between them like snow accumulating on windowsills. Finally, Ryan speaks. Are you going to tell him that I know? Not unless you want me to. This is your story now, Ryan. You get to decide how much of the truth to share and when. But he's going to keep pushing the school to separate us, isn't he? Samuel's jaw tightens, almost imperceptibly. Probably. Your father is used to controlling situations, to managing problems through policy and pressure. He sees our friendship as a threat to his influence over your future. And what do you see it as? Samuel returns to his sanding, the rhythmic motion seeming to calm his thoughts. I see it as the best thing that's happened to me since I lost my family. You've given me a reason to believe that connection and care still matter, that the values Maria and I try to live by aren't naive or outdated. Ryan feels something settle in his chest. Not quite peace, but a kind of resolve. Whatever storm is coming, whatever pressure his father brings to bear, he won't abandon Samuel. He won't let fear or social convention or parental manipulation destroy the first real relationship he's ever had with an adult who sees him clearly. "I won't let him do this," Ryan says with quiet determination. Samuel looks up from his work, seeing something new in Ryan's expression. Not the guarded loneliness that had characterized him months ago, but strength and purpose and loyalty. "Then we'll face whatever comes together," Samuel says. "But Ryan, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll remember that your worth doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Not mine, not your father's, not your classmates. You matter because you exist, because you pay attention to the world around you, because you choose kindness even when it's difficult." Ryan nods, feeling the truth of those words settle into his bones like warmth after a long winter. Outside, the November wind rattles the basement windows, but here in Samuel's workshop, surrounded by tools and honest work and unconditional acceptance, Ryan finally understands what it feels like to be home. Whatever battle is coming, he's ready for it. The conference room in Hawthorne's administration building has witnessed countless difficult conversations over its 100-year history, but the tension that fills it on this December morning feels particularly sharp. Mrs. Dunlop sits at the head of the polished mahogany table, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her expression diplomatically neutral. Around her, the school's board of trustees, 5 men and 3 women representing old money, newer fortunes, and institutional wisdom, study the materials Alexander Caldwell has provided. Alexander himself stands at the far end of the room, his presentation complete, his confidence absolute. He's built his argument methodically. Concerns about appropriate boundaries, questions of professional conduct, the need for clear policies protecting students from potential exploitation by staff members. He's been careful not to make specific accusations against Samuel. Instead, he's framed this as a broader issue of institutional safeguards. "The relationship between Mr. Ortiz and my son may be entirely innocent," Alexander concludes, his voice carrying the measured authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and difficult decisions. "But the appearance of impropriety is almost as damaging as actual impropriety. Hawthorne Academy's reputation depends on maintaining the highest standards of professional conduct." Board Chair Margaret Whitfield, whose family has sent children to Hawthorne for 4 generations, speaks first. "Mr. Caldwell, we appreciate your concerns, but we've reviewed Mr. Ortiz's employment record, and it's exemplary. No complaints, consistent positive feedback from students and faculty, and genuine care for our school community." "With respect, Mrs. Whitfield, that's exactly the problem. Predators are often well-liked and trusted. They build relationships over time, gaining trust before—" "I'm going to stop you right there," interrupts Dr. James Morrison, the board's newest member and a child psychologist by training. "You're suggesting predatory behavior without any evidence. That's not just unfair, it's potentially defamatory." Alexander's jaw tightens. "I'm suggesting that a custodial employee spending excessive amounts of one-on-one time with a vulnerable student raises legitimate questions that any responsible institution should address." Mrs. Dunlop clears her throat. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand your parental concerns, but I have to ask, have you observed any negative changes in Ryan since his friendship with Mr. Ortiz began?" The question hangs in the air. Alexander knows the truthful answer. Ryan seems happier, more engaged, more confident than he's been in years. But admitting that would undermine his entire argument. "This isn't about short-term behavioral changes," Alexander says. "It's about appropriate boundaries and institutional safeguards." "It's about control," says a voice from the doorway. Everyone turns to see Maeve Caldwell entering the conference room without invitation, her press credentials prominently displayed, her expression carrying the fearless directness that has made her one of Boston's most respected investigative journalists. "Maeve," Alexander's voice carries warning, "this is a private meeting." "Not anymore." Maeve takes a seat at the table uninvited, opening her notebook with deliberate ceremony. "Hello, Mrs. Dunlop. Board members. I'm here as a journalist investigating concerns about potential donor influence over educational policy." Mrs. Dunlop's eyebrows rise slightly. "Ms. Caldwell, while we appreciate your interest, this is indeed a closed meeting. Actually, it becomes public record the moment a board votes on policy changes that affect employee conduct. And since my brother is attempting to use his financial influence to target a specific employee, this story is very much in the public interest." Alexander's face darkens. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? Maeve flips through her notes. Samuel Ortiz, co-founder of Cloud Vault Technologies, your former business partner. The man you forced out because he refused to compromise his principles for your profit margins. The room goes completely silent. Several board members exchange glances, clearly recognizing that this conflict is more complex than Alexander had indicated. That has nothing to do with, Alexander begins. It has everything to do with this, Maeve interrupts. You're not protecting your son from an inappropriate relationship. You're punishing Samuel for making you look bad 15 years ago. And you're using your position as a major donor to weaponize institutional policy against a man who chose meaning over money. Margaret Whitfield's voice cuts through the tension. Mr. Caldwell, is it true that you and Mr. Ortiz have a business history? Alexander's pause confirms everything. Our past professional relationship has no bearing on current concerns about appropriate staff conduct. Doesn't it? Dr. Morrison leans forward. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're using legitimate parental concerns as cover for a personal vendetta. Mrs. Dunlop's expression has shifted from diplomatic neutrality to something approaching displeasure. Mr. Caldwell, did you think to mention this history when you first raised your concerns? I didn't think it was relevant. You didn't think your past conflicts with an employee were relevant to your complaints about that same employee. Maeve's voice drips with journalistic skepticism. That's either remarkably naive or deliberately deceptive. The meeting deteriorates from there. Board members ask pointed questions about Alexander's motivations. Mrs. Dunlop quietly seethes about being manipulated into what appears to be a personal dispute. Alexander's carefully constructed argument crumbles under the weight of revealed history and conflicting interests. Meanwhile, 3 buildings away, Ryan sits in Claire Whitman's office, having requested an emergency meeting after hearing rumors about the board session from a friend whose mother serves as a trustee. Is it true, Ryan asks without preamble, is my father trying to get Samuel fired? Claire chooses her words carefully. Your father has raised concerns about staff-student boundaries. The board is meeting to discuss policy implications. That's not what I asked. Claire studies Ryan's face, seeing steel beneath the anxiety. This isn't the guarded, defensive boy who used to deflect difficult conversations. This is someone who has found something worth fighting for. Yes, she says simply. Your father wants Mr. Ortiz's contact with students restricted or eliminated entirely. Ryan's hands clench in his lap. Can he do that? Can he just destroy someone's life because he doesn't like them? Legally? If the school administration believes there are legitimate concerns, they have the authority to modify employee duties or terminate employment. But Ryan, the board isn't going to make decisions based solely on one parent's concerns, especially when those concerns appear to be complicated by personal history. You know about Cloud Vault? I know enough to understand that this conflict predates your friendship with Samuel by many years. Ryan stands and walks to Claire's window, looking out at the campus where he's finally found something resembling happiness. Samuel's the best person I know. He cares about people more than power or money or status. He sees students as human beings, not just problems to manage or achievements to celebrate. I know. And my father wants to punish him for that, for being everything my father used to be before he decided that winning was more important than being decent. Claire joins Ryan at the window. What are you going to do? Ryan turns to face her, his expression determined. I'm going to fight back. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of man Samuel really is, and what kind of man my father has become. That's a big risk, Ryan. Your father controls your financial future, your college prospects, your inheritance. I don't care. Some things are more important than money. Claire smiles slightly. You sound like Samuel. Good. Maybe if more people sounded like Samuel, the world would be a better place. That evening, Ryan finds Samuel in the workshop, methodically cleaning and organizing tools that are already perfectly maintained. The busy work is clearly a coping mechanism, a way to create order when everything else feels chaotic. I heard about the board meeting, Ryan says. Samuel doesn't look up from the wrench he's polishing. Word travels fast in small communities. My aunt was there. She's writing a story about donor influence in private schools. Your aunt? Maeve Caldwell, my father's sister. They don't exactly see eye to eye about anything. Samuel sets down the wrench and finally meets Ryan's eyes. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I'm not caught in the middle. I'm choosing a side, your side. Ryan? No, listen to me. Tomorrow, there's going to be a school assembly. Mrs. Dunlop always has one before winter break, and I'm going to speak. Samuel's expression grows concerned. What are you going to say? The truth. About what your friendship has meant to me. About how you've helped me become a better person. About the difference between someone who cares about students and someone who just wants to control them. That could destroy your relationship with your father. Ryan's smile is sad but resolute. Samuel, you taught me that relationships built on fear and control aren't worth preserving. My father doesn't want a son. He wants a legacy. But I'm not going to be anyone's monument. I'm going to be myself. Samuel feels a surge of pride mixed with protective worry. Ryan has found his voice, his courage, his principles, but the cost of using them might be higher than either of them anticipates. Are you sure about this? Samuel asks. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Outside, snow begins to fall again, dusting the campus with pristine white. Tomorrow will bring the assembly, the confrontation, the moment when Ryan Caldwell steps fully into his own power and makes his choice about what kind of person he wants to be. Some battles are fought with lawyers and board meetings and institutional pressure. Others are fought with simple truth, spoken clearly by someone brave enough to stand up for what matters. The Hawthorne Academy Assembly Hall fills with the restless energy of students eager for winter break, their conversations echoing off the vaulted ceiling that has presided over generations of school gatherings. Parents dot the audience, some here for the traditional pre-holiday program, others drawn by whispers of controversy that have circulated through the community like smoke. Mrs. Dunlop takes the podium with her usual composed dignity, but those who know her well can detect the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness around her eyes. The past week has been a trial by fire. Board meetings, heated phone calls, and the kind of political maneuvering that she'd hoped to avoid during her tenure as headmistress. Good morning, Hawthorne family, she begins, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. As we approach our winter recess, it's traditional to reflect on the values that bind our community together. Today, however, we face questions about those values that require honest conversation. In the third row, Ryan sits between Eli and several other students, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. He's been preparing for this moment since he learned about his father's board presentation, knowing that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons or wealth, but with words spoken in defense of what matters. Samuel sits in the designated staff section, his maintenance uniform pressed and clean, his expression carefully neutral. He's tried to convince Ryan not to speak, worried about the potential consequences for a 14-year-old challenging his powerful father in such a public forum. But Ryan had been adamant, and Samuel recognizes the steel beneath his young friend's quiet determination. Alexander Caldwell occupies a seat in the parent section, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Yesterday's board meeting had been a humiliation. His carefully constructed case demolished by his sister's investigative journalism and the board's discovery of his personal motivations. The vote had been unanimous. No policy changes, no restrictions on Samuel's duties, and a strong suggestion that Alexander examine his own motivations more honestly. Recent events have reminded us that our community includes people from many different backgrounds, Mrs. Dunlop continues, all united by our commitment to education, growth, and mutual respect. Today, we're privileged to hear from several community members about what Hawthorne means to them. The first speakers are predictable. A senior discussing college preparations, a parent praising the school's academic rigor, a teacher reflecting on the joy of watching students discover their potential. But when Mrs. Dunlop calls Ryan's name, a hush falls over the assembly. Ryan walks to the podium with measured steps, his heart hammering but his purpose clear. He adjusts the microphone and looks out at the assembled faces, friends, teachers, parents, and the man whose friendship has changed his life. My name is Ryan Caldwell, he begins, his voice stronger than he feels. Some of you know me as the quiet kid who keeps to himself, or as the son of a major donor to this school. But today I want you to know me as someone who has learned the difference between being seen and being valued. He finds Samuel's eyes in the crowd, drawing strength from the older man's steady presence. 3 months ago, I was invisible here. Not because I was ignored, but because I had never learned how to let anyone really see me. I was going through the motions of education without understanding what learning actually means. I was surrounded by people but completely alone. Ryan's gaze shifts to his father, whose expression has grown increasingly rigid. That changed when I met Samuel Ortiz, not because he's the school janitor, though he performs that job with pride and skill, but because he's the kind of person who notices when someone needs to be seen. He taught me that worth isn't measured by achievement or status, but by how we treat others, especially those who can't do anything for us in return. Murmurs ripple through the audience. This isn't the typical student reflection on school spirit and academic growth. Samuel taught me how to fix stuck windows, but more importantly, he taught me how to understand why things get stuck in the first place. He showed me that patience and persistence can solve problems that force and pressure only make worse. He listened to me talk about art and loneliness and disappointment without trying to fix me or judge me or turn me into someone else. Ryan's voice grows stronger, more confident. Some people have questioned whether our friendship is appropriate. They worry about boundaries and appearances and the potential for misunderstanding. Ryan's pause is deliberate, loaded. But I want to tell you what I've observed about Samuel Ortiz in the months I've known him. He pulls a folded paper from his pocket, notes he's been making, observations that have accumulated like snow on windowsills. I've watched him remember every student's name and something specific about their lives. I've seen him stay late to help struggling kids with problems that aren't part of his job description. I've witnessed him treat the scholarship students and the legacy admits with exactly the same kindness and respect. The hall has grown completely quiet. Even the usual shuffling and whispering has stopped. Samuel never asked me about my father's business or tried to influence my opinions about wealth or success. He never made me feel guilty about my privileges or used our friendship to gain access to anything. What he did was much more radical than that. He treated me like a human being worth knowing, worth listening to, worth caring about. Ryan looks directly at Alexander now, his voice carrying a weight that surprises everyone in the room. I've learned that some adults measure relationships by what they can control or what they can gain. But Samuel taught me that real love, whether it's friendship or mentorship or family, exists without conditions or expectations. It doesn't demand gratitude or loyalty or compliance. It simply recognizes worth and nurtures growth. The silence stretches as Ryan gathers himself for what he knows will be the most difficult part of his speech. There are people who want to destroy this friendship because they don't understand it, or because they see it as a threat to their own authority. They use words like inappropriate and concerning to mask what is really jealousy and fear. They would rather eliminate something beautiful and meaningful than confront their own failures at connection. Several parents shift uncomfortably. Alexander's face has gone pale. But I want everyone here to know that Samuel Ortiz is the reason I believe in goodness again. He's the reason I've started drawing and showing my art to others. He's the reason I understand. The first speakers are predictable. A senior discussing college preparations, a parent praising the school's academic rigor, a teacher reflecting on the joy of watching students discover their potential. But when Mrs. Dunlop calls Ryan's name, a hush falls over the assembly. Ryan walks to the podium with measured steps, his heart hammering but his purpose clear. He adjusts the microphone and looks out at the assembled faces. Friends, teachers, parents, and the man whose friendship has changed his life. "My name is Ryan Caldwell," he begins, his voice stronger than he feels. "Some of you know me as the quiet kid who keeps to himself, or as the son of a major donor to this school. But today, I want you to know me as someone who has learned the difference between being seen and being valued." He finds Samuel's eyes in the crowd, drawing strength from the older man's steady presence. 3 months ago, I was invisible here. Not because I was ignored, but because I had never learned how to let anyone really see me. I was going through the motions of education without understanding what learning actually means. I was surrounded by people but completely alone. Ryan's gaze shifts to his father, whose expression has grown increasingly rigid. That changed when I met Samuel Ortiz, not because he's the school janitor, though he performs that job with pride and skill, but because he's the kind of person who notices when someone needs to be seen. He taught me that worth isn't measured by achievement or status, but by how we treat others, especially those who can't do anything for us in return. Murmurs ripple through the audience. This isn't the typical student reflection on school spirit and academic growth. Samuel taught me how to fix stuck windows, but more importantly, he taught me how to understand why things get stuck in the first place. He showed me that patience and persistence can solve problems that force and pressure only make worse. He listened to me talk about art and loneliness and disappointment without trying to fix me or judge me or turn me into someone else. Ryan's voice grows stronger, more confident. Some people have questioned whether our friendship is appropriate. They worry about boundaries and appearances and the potential for misunderstanding. Ryan's pause is deliberate, loaded. But I want to tell you what I've observed about Samuel Ortiz in the months I've known him. He pulls a folded paper from his pocket, notes he's been making, observations that have accumulated like snow on windowsills. I've watched him remember every student's name and something specific about their lives. I've seen him stay late to help struggling kids with problems that aren't part of his job description. I've witnessed him treat the scholarship students and the legacy admits with exactly the same kindness and respect. The hall has grown completely quiet. Even the usual shuffling and whispering has stopped. Samuel never asked me about my father's business or tried to influence my opinions about wealth or success. He never made me feel guilty about my privileges or used our friendship to gain access to anything. What he did was much more radical than that. He treated me like a human being worth knowing, worth listening to, worth caring about. Ryan looks directly at Alexander now, his voice carrying a weight that surprises everyone in the room. I've learned that some adults measure relationships by what they can control or what they can gain. But Samuel taught me that real love, whether it's friendship or mentorship or family, exists without conditions or expectations. It doesn't demand gratitude or loyalty or compliance. It simply recognizes worth and nurtures growth. The silence stretches as Ryan gathers himself for what he knows will be the most difficult part of his speech. There are people who want to destroy this friendship because they don't understand it, or because they see it as a threat to their own authority. They use words like inappropriate and concerning to mask what is really jealousy and fear. They would rather eliminate something beautiful and meaningful than confront their own failures at connection. Several parents shift uncomfortably. Alexander's face has gone pale. But I want everyone here to know that Samuel Ortiz is the reason I believe in goodness again. He's the reason I've started drawing and showing my art to others. He's the reason I understand. Ryan's breath catches. His mother's death from cancer when he was 8 is a subject they've never discussed directly, a wound too deep for either of them to examine. The doctors had prepared us for the end, but when it actually came, Alexander's voice breaks slightly. I sat beside her bed for hours afterward, holding her hand, trying to understand how someone so vital could simply stop. And I made her a promise. What kind of promise? That I would make sure you never wanted for anything. That I would build something so substantial, so secure, that you would never have to worry about survival or stability or any of the things that keep people awake at night. Alexander's eyes remained fixed on the snow-covered campus. I thought that was love. I thought providing and protecting and planning for your future was the same thing as being present. Ryan feels something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but the beginning of understanding. But that's not what I needed. No, it's not. Alexander finally looks at his son directly. What you needed was what Samuel gave you. Attention, patience, the sense that you mattered for who you are rather than what you might become. The admission hangs between them, honest and painful and long overdue. I listened to your speech today, and I realized something that terrifies me, Alexander continues. You've become the kind of person your mother would be proud of. Not because of anything I taught you, but despite my failures. You have her sense of justice, her ability to see past surfaces to what really matters. Ryan's throat tightens with unexpected emotion. I barely remember her. You remember more than you think. The way you stood up for Samuel today. That was Maria. She never backed down from defending people she cared about, even when it cost her. Alexander's smile is rueful, especially when it cost her. Why did you really try to get Samuel fired? Alexander considers the question seriously, perhaps for the first time. Because seeing him reminded me of who I used to be. Before I decided that winning was more important than being right. Before I chose market dominance over personal integrity. He pauses. And because I was jealous. Of Samuel? of the relationship you have with him, the easy conversation, the mutual respect, the way you light up when you talk about something he's taught you. I realized I couldn't remember the last time you looked at me that way. Ryan thinks about this, about the careful distance he's maintained with his father for years, about the way their conversations have become transactions rather than connections. It doesn't have to stay that way, Ryan says quietly. Doesn't it? I've spent 6 years building walls between us. I'm not sure I remember how to tear them down. Maybe you could start by apologizing to Samuel. Alexander's jaw tightens reflexively, old habits of pride and authority reasserting themselves. But then he looks at his son's face, sees the hope and challenge there, and nods slowly. You're right, I owe him that much. I owe him more than that. They make their way across the snow-covered quad together, their footsteps leaving parallel tracks in the pristine white. Students and faculty who pass them do subtle double-takes. The Caldwell men walking together is an uncommon sight, and their body language suggests something has shifted between them. They find Samuel in the maintenance building, methodically preparing equipment for winter break maintenance. He looks up as they enter, his expression cautious but not unwelcoming. Alexander, Ryan, Samuel sets down the tool he's been cleaning. I heard the assembly went well. Samuel, Alexander's voice carries a formality that gradually softens. I owe you an apology, several apologies actually. Samuel waits without speaking, neither encouraging nor discouraging the conversation. I was wrong to try to end your friendship with Ryan. I was wrong to use my position on the board to attack your character. And I was wrong about your motivations for caring about my son. Alexander's corporate composure cracks slightly. I was also wrong 15 years ago when I chose profit over principles and lost the best partner I ever had. Samuel's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes suggests he's hearing more than just words. I let fear drive my decisions, Alexander continues. Fear that Ryan might judge my choices the way you did. Fear that he might choose meaning over money, service over success. Fear that I might lose him the way I lost you. You didn't lose me, Alexander, Samuel says quietly. I made a choice to leave, just like I made a choice to walk away from wealth after Maria and Isabella died. Those were my decisions, not punishments I inflicted on you. But you were right. About what we were becoming, about what mattered, about the cost of success without purpose. Alexander's voice drops to almost a whisper. I spent 15 years trying to prove you wrong, and all I proved was that money can't buy the things that actually matter. Samuel studies Alexander's face, seeing genuine remorse alongside the pride and pain that have shaped him for decades. The question now, Samuel says, is what you plan to do with that knowledge. Alexander looks at his son, then back at Samuel. I'd like to start by asking if there's any way to salvage what we once had, not the business partnership. I know that's gone forever, but maybe the friendship that existed before we let ambition and ego destroy it. Samuel considers this, aware that Ryan is watching both men with the intensity of someone whose future happiness may depend on their ability to find common ground. Friendship requires trust, Samuel says finally, and trust requires consistency. I won't be your friend on Mondays and your enemy on Tuesdays, depending on how threatened you feel by my relationship with Ryan. I understand. And I won't pretend that your actions over the past month didn't hurt. They did. But I also understand that fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally consider. Alexander nods, accepting the gentle rebuke. As for Ryan, Samuel continues, looking at the young man who has become like a son to him, he doesn't belong to either of us. He's his own person, with his own choices to make about who he wants to become and how he wants to live. Our job, both of us, is to support those choices, not direct them. Even if he chooses differently than we'd prefer, Alexander asks. Especially then. Ryan watches this exchange with something approaching wonder. Two men who have shaped his understanding of what it means to be human are finding their way back to each other, not through grand gestures or dramatic reconciliations, but through honest conversation and mutual recognition of their shared failures and hopes. There's something else, Ryan says, drawing both men's attention. I want to apply for that art competition Mrs. Chen mentioned. And I want to use my real name, not hide behind anonymity or try to downplay where I come from. Alexander's first instinct is to worry about exposure, about judgment, about failure. But he catches himself, recognizing these as his fears, not Ryan's. What would you create, he asks instead. portraits of people who see others clearly, people who choose kindness over convenience, who find dignity in honest work, who measure success by how much good they bring into the world. Samuel smiles. That sounds like a worthy project. It does. Alexander agrees and means it. As they prepare to leave the maintenance building, Samuel calls out to Alexander. There's one more thing. The board meeting, the speech today. Ryan showed tremendous courage standing up for what he believes in. You should be proud of him. Alexander looks at his son, seeing not the heir to a business empire or the bearer of family expectations, but a young man who has found his voice and isn't afraid to use it in defense of what matters. I am proud of him, Alexander says. I'm learning to be proud of him for the right reasons. They walk across the campus together as dusk settles over the snow-covered grounds, three figures moving through the gathering darkness toward whatever future they might build together. Not a perfect family, but a real one, messy and complicated and honest about its imperfections. In the dormitory windows, lights begin to flicker on as students prepare for winter break, for time with families that may be easier or harder than school relationships, but are theirs to navigate. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to choose connection over control, understanding over judgment, love over fear. But tonight, in the gentle snowfall that continues to transform Hawthorne Academy into something magical and new, a father begins to learn what it means to truly see his son, a son begins to forgive a father's limitations, and a friendship forged in loss and strengthened by courage prepares to weather whatever storms may come. Some stories end with victory or defeat, resolution or tragedy. This one ends with something rarer and more valuable. The quiet recognition that worth isn't inherited or achieved, but chosen daily through small acts of attention, kindness, and courage. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we find people who help us remember who we're meant to be. The end. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.